Hi, this is Chad, VP of Products at Slate Digital, and in this video I'm going to introduce you to our newest VMR module, the SD-PE1, which is a faithful reproduction of a classic passive EQ, and as you'd imagine, you use it for EQing stuff. Even if you have used EQ a lot, this one can be rather bizarre in how it's used because the user interface is unique. It's such an old device, the way it was built to be used is not following what we would call kind of traditional standard user interface for EQs these days. So it's worth checking out this video so you know exactly how to use it and also how to take advantage of some almost counterintuitive ways of putting it to use. So this is the SD-PE1 EQ module. And in spite of how many controls you see on this thing, it's really only a 2-band EQ. And that's not even quite accurate. It's more like a 1.5 band EQ. And you'll see more what I mean about that as I go through and explain what these controls can do and what they can't do. And it's kind of difficult for the new person to navigate. I mean, even the original horizontal hardware had the controls arranged together in a way that wasn't exactly clear how they worked or what controls were related to one another. And we've tried to improve that a little bit with how we've spaced apart the controls here. So I'm going to start with these knobs up here. This one that says Attend Select and the knob next to it that says Attend. And what these control is a high shelf EQ. And you choose the frequency here with this selector, and then you choose the attenuation amount with this knob. Now this is weird because this knob goes clockwise, which most of us associate with turning up a frequency band. But as you turn this to the right, turn it clockwise, you will be bringing that selected frequency down. So that's one of the first things to learn. And you might think it's kind of strange that this goes all the way up to 30 kilohertz because, human hearing is typically between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. But the EQ curve, the slope on this shelf is so slow, so smooth that even when you have it set to 30, which wasn't possible on the original, by the way, even when it's all the way up there, when you pull down this band, it will affect the high frequencies that you can hear, just a little more subtly than the original can do. Same thing is true with the 3K selection down here. This was not available on the original hardware either. But anyway, go ahead and choose what you want, and then turn up this knob, and it will start to attenuate that frequency. Now, there's a similar arrangement down here with these 3 knobs. There is a high frequency selector that goes between 1 kilohertz all the way up to 16 kilohertz. And unlike this band here, this is a bell-shaped band, so a parametric EQ instead of a shelf. And you choose the frequency that you want here. And with the bandwidth knob, you also choose the width of the bell. And when it's all the way left, that's when it's sharp, so it's a very narrow bell. And then when you go towards the right, towards broad, that's where it becomes wider. And there is just a single knob that controls this one, and this one is labeled Boost. So when you turn this one to the right, you will end up increasing the level of that particular EQ band. But you can only increase it. There is no way to attenuate the selected band. So this is what I mean when I was saying these are kind of half bands. This top shelf is sort of half a band because you can attenuate it but not boost. And this band here is also kind of a half band because all you can do is boost it, not attenuate. So this is one of just the kind of strange idiosyncrasies of using this particular EQ. Now things get even weirder when you get down to this low band. Now this is a low shelf. So up at top, this was a high shelf. This is a mid peak or bell. And then this one is a low shelf. And you can go between 20 and 100 hertz. And we've added a couple extra frequencies that weren't in the original, but are actually derived from some of the other models of this EQ. So these are all authentic curves here from variants of this device. And you have an attenuation knob here. So if you turn this up clockwise, you end up attenuating this frequency just like you were doing up here. But there's also a boost knob. And so if you turn this one clockwise, you end up boosting this frequency. So this actually is kind of more like a full band EQ. You can select the frequency and you can either boost it or you can cut it by a certain amount. But what's also weird is that you can boost it and cut it at the same time. Now, the fact that you can do this, even though the original user's manual suggested that you don't do this, what engineers discovered is that, unlike what you might think, this does not cancel out the effects of this EQ. Boosting and attenuating on the same frequency doesn't just come up with a flat curve. Instead, what ends up happening is you get this really satisfying and musical kind of low-mid dip. So kind of one way to describe it is that the boost is a bit lower in frequency than the attenuation is. So the attenuation is a bit higher in frequency. So when these two try to overlap, the attenuation still takes out a bit of the frequencies that the low end doesn't boost. And this is what has been kind of recently been known as the kick trick, to turn up both frequencies at the same time, both to apply some extra oomph down in the bass, but at the same time when you apply the attenuation, it takes out this kind of muddy mid-range area and you get this really nice fat sounding kick drum. So let's check out how this works. I've got a drum track here. Yep, sounding pretty good. And I guess I'm going to just start by isolating the kick drum. So that's what we're hearing for the kick right now. And I'm going to go ahead and do this kick trick, right? I'm going to turn up the boost on the bass, and we'll start hearing more bass come in. Oh, yeah. Yeah, gets nice and big and fat like that. And you can see as I change this frequency, now it's getting higher up and it's kind of getting a little pillowy and puffy up here. But down here, sounds pretty good. But now I'm going to apply some attenuation. I'm not going to actually boost this much. I think that's a bit too much. But let's go ahead and turn up the attenuation and watch what happens, or listen to what happens. Ooh. Okay, so now we've got this we've added this bass. There's a little bump in the bass, but we've also taken out some mid-range at the same time. Here, let me toggle this off and take a listen. Right, that's without the EQ. Let's put it back in a sec. Ooh, yeah. So that's really nice. And that's all you have to do. And we've actually implemented a little feature to make this easier to dial in. Just hold Shift on your keyboard while turning one of these knobs and the other one turns with it. So you can immediately kind of get that double kick trick effect and just by tweaking one knob at a time, and just find a level that sounds good for you. It's a little too much. Yeah, but right there I think is good. Yeah, cool. And then we can also use the mid-band here to accentuate the beater a bit. I'm going to turn this up. I think it's actually too high. I don't like it down there. That's too low. But that's too high. Now, one of the things is, you've probably noticed here, is that these knobs are snapping to certain frequencies. And that's because this device is actually changing out components internally to select the different frequencies that you're using. And so that means it only had the capability originally of doing a 3K boost or a 4K boost. But what we've also decided to do here is we allow you to interpolate between these curves. All you need to do is hold Command or Control on your keyboard and then start moving down. And now you can see it's possible to actually choose frequencies between the two original frequencies. So this allows you to find a frequency that wasn't actually possible on the original. There it is. Yeah, right in between. So 3, it's kind of a bit nasally and pinchy. 4 is a bit too high. But there it is, 3.5. That's right where I want it. So that's it. So let's turn this off. Back on. Oh yeah. In fact, let's put the whole kit in now. Take a listen to this. I'll turn it off. I'll put it back in. Yeah. So that's it. That's how you go through this device and set the various frequencies. And that's also an example of this kick trick that pulls out the mids by turning up both of the low frequency bands at the same time. But you don't have to just use this on kick drums alone. This works on lots of different things. I'm actually using it also on the snare drum here. And because this is a 2-band EQ, or 1.5 and a half, depending on how you look at it. This is more for just general sort of broad stroke EQ adjustments. This isn't the type of EQ that is good for surgical changes, where you just need to get in and manipulate very tiny frequencies. The low shelf and the high shelf curves are very smooth. And even when you have the mid-band, or this high frequency with a very sharp bell shape, it's not that sharp. There are EQs that go way sharper than what this is capable of. So what I tend to recommend, at least, is to use the SD-PE1 to just get close to the sound you want. It's a very nice musical way to kind of overcome initial problems with the sound, and then use another EQ, such as the FGS, to dial in the last little bits that are necessary to make it sound perfect. So let's take a look at how this is affecting the snare drum here. Let me go ahead and just solo the snare. And this is what the snare originally sounded like. And I'm going to turn this up, and as you're going to hear, it's going to add a lot of low end, but also cut out a bit of the upper mids, so it's hopefully not too pillowy sounding. And we should also get a little more articulation here up in the kind of cracky snare area. Let's take a listen. Oh yeah. So this filled out a lot. Without. And put it back in. Yeah, so we can hear the kind of difference that makes. Without. Big difference there. Very nice. And then I can use the FGS to just add a little more detail to it. And I can even add the transient shaper to give me some more. Yeah, love it. But that's just examples with drums. I can also show you how this works on bass. So again, going to be using this kind of trick to add some low end support to the bass, while also using the attenuation to pull a little bit of the muddiness out that would happen just above the support area. And then I'm also giving it a big boost around 3K to bring out more of the finger noise, give it a little more poppy nature. And I'm also applying a little bit of high shelf to just kind of get rid of some of the amp noise that's coming through as well. So here it is without. And let's add it in. Yeah. We can add the drums to that. Without. Yeah, so that helped a lot. We can even get some more maybe. Ooh. Yeah, nice. Yeah, and this can just be applied anywhere you want. Even though it is just a 2-band EQ, like I was saying, it's great for doing any sort of just general changes to improve things. I think I used it on the B3 here. Yep, used it on the Hammond to give it a little more fullness. Without it, it was just kind of thin, and it lacked a lot of the upper detail that I wanted to cut through. So that just warmed it up really nicely. And I also even used it on the horn mix over here. If we take a listen to the horn bus. Maybe I can find a section that has a bit more. Yeah, like over here. Without. Kind of thin. But with it back in. Much fuller. Yeah, so this is great to use all over your mix. It's really nice because it also doesn't quite tell you what it's doing. You'll notice that aside from the frequency being an absolute value, attenuation and boost are just these arbitrary numbers. It's not actually 10 dB of attenuation and 10 dB of boost. They're not even symmetrical. I think the attenuation is something like -17 at most, but the boost is only +13 or something. So this really does force you to use your ears a lot more when you're using it. And I think that can kind of be nice instead of always looking at what the EQ is set to or looking at a frequency waveform while graphically moving things around. So it's a great thing to start with, and then as I often do, just add another EQ after it to do any of the just fine surgical tweaks that you need. And there's one other knob up here, this little switch that says tube off and on. There's a passive EQ part, which when used makes the output signal much lower than the input was. And so the original device had a tube amp on it to bring the level back up. And not only did it bring the level up, but that tube stage also imparted a little bit of character on the sound as well, potentially some additional saturation and harmonics. And it also has a very steep roll off. And if you've got enough saturation and you kind of want to skip that stage, you can flip this to off. And the EQ part still works. You can take advantage of the curve of the EQ, but just leave out the characteristics of the tube if you'd like. So it's totally up to you, and just select it with that knob right there. So I'm really loving this EQ. I never got a chance to use a real one when I worked back in studios. We never had one or two mounted in the rack. But through this plugin, I'm now understanding why this EQ is just so renowned in the industry, even after all these decades. It sounds great. It's got a nice musical curve. But I think the other thing is that because it has limited options, I'm being more selective about when I actually use EQ. It's been a fun exercise recently to just start with this one EQ and see how far I can get. And I think what I'm doing is actually paying more attention just to the levels in my mix. I think it's really easy for some of us to fall into that trap of just immediately going for an EQ when something doesn't sound right in our mix. And we end up with frequency spectrums that look like roller coasters in the end. But here, this really can't happen if you're just playing with a low shelf, a mid peak, and a high shelf. You just have to be very careful about what you're doing, and the results end up being smoother, and I think the parts then blend together better in the end. So I'd be really curious to hear your experience with this. Just open up Slate Digital Connect and download the latest update, and you'll have the SD-PE1 ready for you to use. But if you don't yet have the All Access Pass subscription, head on over to slatedigital.com and sign up for the free trial. You'll get that plugin plus all the others and all the sample packs and all the Slate Academy videos for you to try. And at the end of the trial, you can then sign up for one of our low-cost plans. And as a reminder, you can even sign up for complete access, which is not only the All Access Pass subscription, but adds SSL Complete from our friends over at Solid State Logic as well. This comes with more SSL plugins and Harrison plugins, so you just have a huge ton of high-quality plugins to make your mixes sound amazing. So, I thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.